Test, 1, 2, test, test. I always love that. Everybody can hear me okay? Yes. All right. Looks like a pretty good group here today. I only recognized one person that I know in here. Most of you all are from Summit County here? Most everybody? All right. Well, this is a nice thing that they do for y'all. I remember as a kid driving through Frisco here, and there wasn't anything. There was a couple of these old log cabins and stuff, and we used to kind of like look and see if we could see anybody, you know. I just saw some huge apartments being built over down the street over here, so, you know, it definitely amazes me, you know. I'm primarily, my history, my work has been in mining and in underground mining. Now, most of what I've done is that on okay?
I was just waiting for you to finish
most of the mining that I've done is small time mining here in Colorado too. You guys are familiar with a lot of the big mines now, which is what most mining corporations have had to go through to make it more profitable, of course. In the old days, a lot of the mining was smaller style mining because the miners were chasing veins. Okay, you guys probably know that. I'd kind of like to just have people, if you have any questions while I'm talking, go ahead and just ask me, you know. And I'll try to keep it going, but, you know, it's nice to have people interact with you, I feel, you know. If you don't feel that way, then you can just sit there and look at me. But my mining has started actually underground in 1974. Here in this, I started in the Leadville area. I had primarily tried to get work in the Telluride area before it became all famous and everything down there. But I couldn't get a job because I had no experience. The Idorado mine was working in Telluride at the time, but then the Climax mine was working and we hired on right away. So through the years, I did other types of mining. It's called contract mining. And it's basically the more work you do, in other words, the more drilling, blasting, and rock you break out in the ore bodies, the more you get paid. So it was a good incentive for miners, and it was a good incentive for mining companies because they got more production. Okay? So I've got this poster right here. If everybody can kind of see it, I hope enough. It's I tried to make it big enough, but it shows you sort of different ideas. Now everybody has sort of ideas about mining. If you've never been around it, sort of not ideas. But everybody pretty much knows that placer mining is the first stage of mining. And that was none the case, same case here in Colorado. You know that the miners blew through Colorado originally to go to California in late 1849. California had a gold rush. Now there were some guys who stopped here in Colorado on the way through and said, hey, there's some stuff here that might be worth looking at. But the thing they knew, it was in California, so everybody just blew through Colorado, pretty much so, as far as the mining industry went. Now, when mining sort of slowed down and started to die in California and some guys came back through here, they really started carefully looking. And of course, placer mining, as you guys know, is you start off with just a pan, right? And you're swirling that pan around and you're trying to find the flakes of gold out of the heavier sands. You're trying to wash those away. So it can be profitable, but it's not really profitable. There's things set up, as you guys probably know, sluicing. And I have some photos that I'll kind of try to go through with this, but I'm just going to talk about it first a little bit. Sluicing boxes. There was hydraulic mining. Anybody heard of that before? We have big cliff sides and they use like water cannons under pressure and wash down a lot more gravel and they can process a lot more. Now remember too, back in those days, you know, a lot of the mining that was done, the miners didn't think about environmental stuff, you know. And mining today is much more conscious about environmental, which is a good thing, and they have to be, you know. State of Colorado mandates anybody working in Colorado has to have permits, and they keep a pretty sharp eye on you to make sure that things are replenished the way you found them. Properties that I have, when I'm finished with it, it's supposed to be elk habitat again. So it takes some work to do that, takes some money, reseeding, all kinds of stuff, cleanup and removal of objects and stuff. So placer mining is what we'll kind of start with. Let me see if it shows on here. I think it does show some. It doesn't really show placer mining on this. I'm sorry, it's only for, it's only, sorry, it's only underground stuff. Sorry guys, this microphone's got me a little bit kind of, I'm not used to a microphone. From there, from placer mining, of course, the miners will go up a valley or something trying to find where that placer had flowed to, and it's usually gravity that's brought it down through erosion, through water erosion or shifting of the ground or geologic occurrences. And so the miners would go look, say like up the valley, up the creek, right? Now they might find some rocks where the gold was exposed, and then they might start digging underground, okay? So in the early years, here especially in Colorado, there wasn't a lot of guys that were too experienced with that. And so a lot of Irish and Cornwall miners came here from Ireland and from Cornwall to mine, and they knew the same type of mining that needed to be done here to safely extract it from underground. So that helped things a lot. Blasting through the years, and I'm going to talk a little bit about blasting because I think people kind of have a fascination with it somewhat. But so I'll talk a little bit. As you guys can see, I brought an old blasting box, which was basically just a generator. When you plunge it down, it creates enough electricity to set off electric delays. Okay, but blasting has really occurred, you know, changed a lot through the years. I'm going to see if we have time, if I can kind of demonstrate to you how you might drill around underground and get that to blast correctly, because it's really an art. It's a science and an art together to be good at it. So miners aren't just a bunch of dumb old guys with strong backs. So let me see if I grab my little pointer here. So if you guys can see, these are just a couple of pictures. And it's hard to see them, I know, because the light and stuff like that. They weren't the greatest pictures. These are just a couple of pictures that I took maybe a year ago underground, okay, up in a small mine up in Leadville. Work that we've been doing up there. This mine, actually, I worked for about 9 years. I ran it as an underground tour mine. Anybody go to that? Did anybody go? You did?
Off the train too.
Okay, so that was my property there. It was a very popular tour, but when the fires happened in California because of transformers, I think it was maybe about 2013 or so, XL Energy, the power company up in that area, would not re-energize my power lines after the winter. They said they were too old. And I said, well, that's not my problem, that's your all's problem. And so I did have to go to State Public Utilities Commission and fight them, and I actually won the case. So they ended up probably spending a very exorbitant amount of money to get me power to the mine. But by that time it had been almost 3 years that I had to be closed. So I just didn't reopen. So pretty uninteresting pictures. I'm sorry. So this guy's here. These are actually pictures that are in the National Mining Hall of Fame about blasting. I'll see if I can come back to those when I talk. And of course, Alfred Nobel. So this picture here is early part of Leadville. Okay, this was the iron silver mine, is what they called it. Well, most people, when they came up here, the placer miners, there was about 4,000 people within 1 month that came up there. I'm not as familiar, I'm sorry, with the Summit County things that go on, but I know there was a great deal of placer mining that happened over in the Farncombe Hill area here in Breckenridge. As a matter of fact, if nobody knows, I think some of the largest gold nugget ever found was found over there. It's called Tom's Baby, and it is in the Museum of Nature and Science. I think some pieces broke off with it, but originally the guy who was taking it around and showing people was holding it like a baby. So that's why it became known as Tom's Baby. So I would probably be holding it like that too myself. But you can see things are starting to develop here. This is the iron silver mine. And this was kind of after the gold rush in the Leadville area, they discovered silver. So you guys can't forget that there was a lot of silver in Colorado too.
Did they placer for silver as well? How do you switch? How did they switch from gold to silver?
Well, they had to go underground for the silver because it was in ore, so it had to be extracted.
So they could see it
Yeah,
when they were down
yeah.
there searching for gold.
Yeah, there's free silver, you know, or native silver we call it, but there's also different types of ore, sericites and stuff like that have to be milled and processed to extract the silver correctly. But they found in the Leadville area where their sluice boxes were, they had a gray sand that kept clogging the sluice boxes, and they weren't sure what it was, but they wanted to get the gold, so they kept moving. And when they came back, they found out with assays that it was actually high-grade silver. And so it was actually pretty convenient for Colorado, and particularly Leadville probably, because the government went on to the silver standard. So we started using silver to make coins. And that just really set the silver mining throughout the country into a huge boom. But as you guys know, Colorado has lots of areas where silver was predominantly mined here too, not just gold.
What was the deepest depth of that last mine you showed us?
This one right?
Yes.
This one here, actually what they did with this is they drove declines down into the side of the hill. So on my map here it shows, see the incline?
Yes.
Am I bouncing off that speaker too much, Sarah? Okay, so can you see the incline?
Yes.
That's what they did in that particular case there. To get to the ore. And you can see on this print, the red is representative of the ore. Okay, so that's how they found that. And it's actually a little bit more convenient because you're going just downhill, right, into the ground. You're not digging a tunnel in, so you do have to pull the cars or the muck up out, but it's different than a vertical shaft, like what you have over here with the head frame. You can see it gets a little bit more technical as far as depth goes.
And the removal in a vertical shaft, the removal of the product would be?
It's just called a shaft. Can you see a cage here?
Yes.
And a bucket would pull it up to the surface and dump it on surface. A lot of times there was buildings, even mill processing plants built right at the mine site so they could process the ore right there. But predominantly the ore in a lot of these areas had to be sent to what we call a smelter. If you guys do or don't know, in the Leadville area, smelters were actually taken over in some of the later years completely by the Guggenheim family. So you can almost attest that the Guggenheims made their fortune through processing the ore in Leadville. And then they had some mines too. The Guggenheims had mines up there. So this is part of this Iron Hill again. Somebody's got their laundry out there. They didn't have dryers back in those days. They didn't have the LG dryers back in those days. Okay, now this is actually what's called Carbonate Hill. This is Leadville District also. This is actually pretty close to where my home is. But as you guys look across that, can you see that pretty good? Is it okay? That is, there's not a single building left there. Might find a board here or there kicking around, but there's nothing left. So, you know, as time went by, you probably had the Depression. You know, you had other miners wanting wood and stuff like that, so they would go and rob where people had left and things like that. So a lot of different reasons. This right here is about 1890. Okay. Maybe a little bit earlier, 1885. Now this is, if you guys have heard of, some of these things were for sort of a Leadville thing I did. So this is actually what's called the Little Pittsburgh Mine. And if you guys have heard the story of Horace Tabor, actually Horace Tabor made his wealth mostly in Leadville and mostly off of silver. But Horace, you know, he put a lot of money back into Colorado. You know, unfortunately, the Guggenheims never put anything back into Colorado, just something to think about, you know. And Horace had actually, I believe it was probably actually to his demise because he was trying to do so many things that he spent all his money, you know, or if he would have just banked it and maybe bought some stock and something else or did something, you know, he would have been all right. So, but this is what they call Friar Hill up there in that same district up there. I believe the Leadville area by 1887 had over 40,000 people. And I don't know if you guys know, but they did want it to be the capital of Colorado at one time. Yeah, you could imagine if that was the capital, huh? You guys would be kind of like Lakewood over here in the suburbs. Now this right here, guys, is some of the early ways that the miners actually extracted the ore from a shaft type thing. Has anybody seen these kind of things before?
Yes.
Pretty simple. It's called a windlass, right? They call it a windlass because the guy's just cranking by hand. Now, I've worked in the shafts before, quite a bit of work like that, and I think about this, and the guy up there on top, what if all of a sudden a fly came over, and he's like, and he let go of the handle with a bucket full of rocks, and you're down on the bottom. You better be like ready to get out of the way, and you can see the hole's not very big, so there's not much room to get out of the way, but anyway, I don't know if that ever happened too much, but I always thought, boy, I wouldn't like that, you know, bucket full of rocks coming down. Anyway, those were really quite popular when you found some rocks up on the surface and you maybe found some signs of color in the ground there, so you would start just digging straight down on it, you know. Any kind of veins or ore or anything like that you found would sort of dictate your direction that you would go, right? A lot of times you would find you'd go down and then you would be able to go out in tunnels. And that's primarily where most of the type work was done. So,
How deep did they usually have to go?
well, something like that with just a hand cranking, I think would probably be about 30 or 40 feet before they would, and I don't know if I have a picture on here, but they might set up, it's called a whim. It's called a horse whim. So you would gear it to pull up the shaft, but the horse would go around in a circle on a big rope and a wheel. Okay, so that would do the mechanical end of it for you. But you get too far down, you know, it gets heavier and harder to work, of course. And hopefully you're in rich gold, so then it's really heavy to pull up.
And the horse was down underground.
Sometimes they would bring them underground, but a lot in the early they would have it up top.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope I have a picture of that so I can kind of show you the way something like that might work, but I don't know if I do for sure. They did bring horses underground, yes, and mules and stuff, and I think I do have a picture of one in here. I have an old miner's book, and it's from the 1880s, and it actually shows you how to make a sling for your mule to drop him down the head frame, down the shaft, how to make a sling for him. So unfortunately, you know, a lot of those mules, they've really cared for them, they took good care for them, but most of them probably died underground, you know. I don't know if all of them did, but you know, when you're in the darkness like that all the time, if they're around the miners would have candles and stuff like that with them, you know, or maybe in later years the carbide lamps, you know. I should have brought some of that stuff for you guys to look at. Now here's a guy, some of my slides are a little bit sort of mixed up, but here's a guy, a gold panning guy. Obviously, one of the things you'll notice if you're looking at any kind of history books around Colorado, like this picture here, you might see it. You might see it in like 10 different books. You know, these books are all in the State Historic Society, but I can tell certain things because I've gone through so many, where maybe like a group of 3 miners posed for a photographer. In this one mine, you know, they did different poses all around in the same day, you know. So it wasn't like they were really working there. And if you look at some of those pictures, you can tell like the guy's not really swinging or, you know, so. And this guy I see a lot, to be honest with you. As a matter of fact, he has 2 buddies that I've seen with him. And I took that picture, it was an old black and white, and I actually turned it into a watercolor. So I made it a watercolor. One of the things I really loved about it is these guys are all sitting there, and one of the guys had a border collie, and he's sitting right there with him, too. So here's some of the hydraulic mining. It's a little bit hard to see, but can you see the water cannons up in here? They called those monitors. And it was pretty, you could get gravity to help you, obviously, you know. They would set up, they would find water up higher in a valley, and they would dig ditches down to where the water was actually flowing pretty powerfully, and they would wash down these. So these are the sluices with several guys working here. Think that guy's really working, or you think he's kind of posing there, you know? All these guys are...
So these were powered by steam?
No, they were water powered. Yep. Steam was the first power for most hoisting equipment and stuff like that. You are correct. Yep.
Is that a woman standing in the spray up there?
Up in here? It could be. I think I have, you know, the women were tough as nails, some of them back then, guys, you know. I think about it, and I think sometimes, you know, some of the older people, you know, that they lived many years, and you're there cooking off of wood stoves, you're, you know, you're struggling to feed yourself and everything, and you think about what we have today now, and we've actually got it pretty soft, you know, when you think about it, so. Now, this is just kind of a picture I liked because it shows you how far up in. I think they figured this was at about 13,000 feet. But, you know, just the amazing stuff that these guys did to chase the ore. Well, it was a way to make money. It was a way to get rich, right? So you're going to be willing to do just about anything. But this is kind of nice. You know, a lot of people would die for the view when they go out of the tent in the morning with their coffee like that. Huh? Now, this is hoisting equipment, and you can see it is steam powered here. These are the steam pistons over here. Some of the mines and stuff had huge boiler plants, you know, to produce the steam. And a lot of the equipment, one thing that was, when you got into these deeper shafts like this, the hoist would be in here, okay? When you got into these deeper shafts, you also got into a lot more water primarily. And water is a major issue in Colorado mines for a lot of reasons, but it has to be pumped out, and they would actually have steam-powered pumps. So anyway, this is this right here. It's called an indicator dial. Can you guys see the arrow right there?
Yes.
And that arrow, as you would go down, would go to a certain point. Then the operator would have a fine-tuning mark here on the drum. He could stop the guys right at the level that he needed them to. Or he could park the skip bucket where it could be loaded with ore. Now sometimes too, we're talking about the mules underground and stuff like that. They would load whole cars up to the top. You guys have seen some of the little mine cars. I'm sure there's some here around town a little bit, things like that. So I don't know why this guy is standing over here, but now here's some guys on a cage ready to go down in the elevator. What do you guys think? Anybody like to do that?
No, I don't think it's an elevator.
That looks like a comfortable ride to me. So through my years before, and it's not legal, we've ridden buckets, the old buckets down, up and down shafts. If you don't have two men on it, it's hard to balance because you got the rope like this and you're leaning. So it can be very tiring even going up a couple of 100 feet. But it sure beats climbing ladders out, you know. So there was a story that I heard about a guy who died in a mine shaft accident around 1872. And he had lit his round to blast in the shaft. They were mining downwards. He lit the round to blast, hopped on the bucket and started riding up the bucket, but something happened where it actually probably swung too far somewhere and caused him to fall off. But here's the thing is that he died in the fall, falling back down, but at least his body put out the fuse, so he didn't get blown up too. So they had somebody to bury. Is that a little too rough?
Silver lining to every story.
But I'm not sure which property this is, but it's a fairly large property. And you can see here, this is actually even called a Johnson bar. You could put one of the cars that you guys have probably seen around the town. You would roll a car onto there. They would have rail built into the base of this thing, and you would put the Johnson bar so it wouldn't roll off either way. Pretty fast way of transferring ore to go to the surface. Now here again, here's another winds that I showed you, but windlass that I've shown you. You see the size of these buckets, those look pretty heavy. I mean, if you got rocks in those look pretty heavy to me, you know. Even for back when I was, by the way, back in my early days or my regular days of mining, they didn't have any gyms, because after a day of work in the mine, you didn't want to go pump iron in some gym. You were in pretty good shape already, But this is kind of a picture of a backfilled winze here. So if you were on a certain level, you might have a winze like this because the ore continued down. Okay, so it was a way to do that from inside of the mine. And you never necessarily knew you might be mining on a vein horizontally through a tunnel underground, and then you would be able to tell that the ore was going down deeper too. So you're going to extract that too. So now these are mostly going to be kind of a few underground pictures for you because I think that's kind of sort of my my more area of expertise and stuff, and this older type stuff. Now these were air powered drills here too, as you can see, pneumatic powered. That guy looks fairly old, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You know, he looks, it's a hard life, you know, he's had there. And then the boss has got to be standing there like looking over his shoulder. These type of drills like this, these were actually the first air-powered drills. And they did rotate, okay? So it was a hardened steel bit that was made by the blacksmiths. They did rotate, and the machine would also, the air cylinder in it would push it up, okay? So the miner would actually rake it back and forth. As it pounded up into the rock, it was basically just chiseling its way up into the rock. Now the guys were standing right there. There's no water involved, so this is fine dust that comes out. A lot of miners died of silicosis. It's a little bit different because a lot of people think of black lung for coal mining, but that sort of cakes and coats your lungs, you know. Silicosis is actually small arrow-shaped or triangular-shaped particles that actually cut into your lungs. So it does damage to your lungs. You know, guys might be 40 years old and, you know, 38 years old and pass away young. You know, some of these mining towns, a woman who was like 40, 45 years old, she had 3 husbands by that time in her life. You know, a couple of them died of consumption and stuff. And one husband back then, if he stayed out too late at the saloon, whack, she took him out, and that was it. You know, they didn't put up with that kind of stuff back in those days. Cast iron frying pans too, you know, they weren't those little pink aluminum ones, you know. So here's some guys, and you can see this type of work is what's called the hand drilling. This was before that pneumatic drill. Like I say, my slides are a little bit kind of mixed up, but still guys were using old drills like this. The hand drill, it's like a chisel, and you would just hit it and turn it, hit it and turn it. But there's not near as much dust coming out of a hole like that as those pneumatic drills would. But you can see these guys are working in a vein that's going up here in a stope area. You can see they're working up there, and you can also see, you know, the method of operation is just to brace a couple of logs in there and kind of work off that, you know. You could be working easily 200 feet off the ground in something like that, you know. So it takes a little bit of huevos too, guys. Here's another guy in the hand drilling thing, but I'm sure these guys are posing, you know. I could see that guy hasn't even started drilling his hole yet over here. And this guy's just poof, you know, take the photo. But that's a 4-pound hammer, and that was commonly used by a single person. You know, 2 guys, has anybody ever heard of the double jacking before? So 2 guys, one guy would hold and turn the steel while the other guy swung as hard as he could, you know. Not too commonly would a guy miss, the guy that was swinging, but if he did, you can imagine, you know. Some of the mining towns throughout Colorado still have mining competitions. If you guys ever get a chance to see some of that, you'll see some of the pneumatic drills, and you'll see some of the guys still doing these hand drilling things. There was a guy that I drilled against, it was pneumatic drills at a competition in Ouray some years back, and he held the world record for this hand drilling like that. He drilled 17 inches in 10 minutes. You imagine that? Yeah, and in the pneumatic drill competition, he kicked my butt too. So that was that. But he was a heck of a nice guy. So here's another guy. He's up here. And you can see, oh, look at this. I got my plank to stand on. All I need is about 8 more inches. So I'll stand on that box there, you know. Look like a good idea to you guys? Huh?
And then
And-
how far is below it?
There's no telling. That could be a great distance down. But see, you see your stoles here where you work off of and you place planks across. You would commonly just leave those stoles even when you blasted because the rock could fall down through and it would go to, I'll show you some pictures here of what they would call chutes, okay, where they would load it at a track level or somewhere where there was mules or something. So now here's a guy with another pneumatic drill here. If you can see that cross piece in there, a common way to drill is that. He looks like he's drilling up. Can you see these old leftover blast holes there from where it sheared that rock off? So he's probably following up something like this in this vein or stope up in there. But if you can see down here too, it's a hand crank. So as that machine is rattling and roaring, he's got to crank that with his hand, you know. You talk about a guy that you don't want to arm wrestle. Holy mackerel, you know. He'd take you out in a second, you know. His arm is so strong, so. Now here's another guy, and I think one of the reasons I put this in, because I think this guy is pretty nervy. I think he's just standing on a drill steel that's stuck in the rock. That's what he's working off of there. So he may not be up that high, but even if you're up 3 feet there, there's a good chance you might fall. And
These guys were employed by a mining company, right? They're not just out there to get their own gold.
well, a lot of them were employed by mining companies, yeah. Usually by a certain time it got to the point where it was more mining companies had the money to back up for the boilers for this equipment, to buy this equipment and stuff like that, yeah.
He might still be working for himself there.
He could be, and then you know, I explained to you guys a little bit about the contract mining in the beginning. You know, he might be working under the auspice of, okay, I drilled and blasted out 20 tons today. I'm going to get 50 cents a ton. So he might be doing that, you know. So they're willing to take risks too to get it done, you know.
When did the pneumatic drills come in?
The Buzzies actually came in, Stopers, they came in about 1860. No water to them, but steam powered, yeah. I have a pretty neat little old catalog up here. I know one gal was looking at it a little bit earlier, but it's from a machine making company that I had. It's just an old style catalog. Shows you some of the old drills and even some of the pricing on them, you know. I don't know if you guys know, but Colorado was huge on manufacturing not only the hoists, that one hoist that you saw there, all kinds of those. There was different companies that made them. All kinds of these different drills, all kinds of pumps. It was very big in Colorado, probably because mining was so much centered here, you know. So now here's another, everybody's kind of posing, I'm sure, for this, but another pneumatic drill. Noise, you know, nobody really thought about ear protection back then that I know of, you know. So these are very noisy. Actually, this catalog I has this exact type column for sale in there. So I think the catalog we figured out was from around 1890, somewhere in there.
Talk about following a vein. What would a typical vein be? I mean, is it 2 inches wide? Is it a...
It could be anywhere from 2 inches wide to 2 feet wide.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I've in my years of mining, one time I was mining a horizontal tunnel going this direction, and I crossed a vein that was going perpendicular at an angle. So right away we knew it was very high grade, and it was a boronite copper, which is a good indication of gold too. And it was a very rich area. This area was very, very high grade area. It was actually part of, have you guys ever heard of the Little Johnny or the Ibex mines before? John Brown was part owner, and his wife was unsinkable Molly Brown, if you've heard that story. So extremely rich gold mines. But those mines actually even came into effect in the Leadville area after the crash of silver. Silver crashed in 1893. The federal government put out the Sherman Silver Purchase Tax, so they quit buying that silver. And so that really, really hurt the silver industry. But they were lucky in Leadville because they had some of the big companies, some of the big guys had money, and they had the knowledge to come in and mine deeper and get to the good gold ore, where they had never really had the knowledge nor the money to get to it in earlier years. So now here's a guy, he's doing a little bit of blasting here. You all can just imagine how many mine accidents occur from explosives. In my years through mining, I know of at least 4 people that I knew passed away because of explosives accidents. So actually a recent accident down in the mine down in Uray, they found old dynamite back in some of the old drifts when they were mining back and reopening an old mine down there. And so they set that off in a separate room and blasted that. Well, the gases from that had robbed the air of the oxygen. And so the guys didn't wait and give it proper enough time to ventilate out. This was probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and they went back in there, and you're just gone, just like that. And then another guy went to see what happened to him. Poof, you know. So you got to think when it comes to a lot of this stuff. But I'll go through, if you guys are interested, a little bit about blasting techniques here, if we still have time and everything. So there's your common little ore car you guys can see there. The blasting was commonly done by hand shovel to dig it out in the early years. So you can imagine if you see, I don't know, if you see some of maybe the large piles that are left up in the Farncombe Hill area over in Breckenridge, if you can imagine that that amount of dirt, it's called the spoils, came out from underground by a single carload like that. You can just look at it and go, oh my God, that was a lot of work that was done, you know.
What's in the car? Is that ore?
I think it's either or it's just the rock he's been shoveling in there. Yeah.
What kind of mining?
What's that?
What are you mining?
It was gold, silver, yeah, but there was also lead, copper, and zinc, too. So pretty complex ore, but that ore basically had to be smelted. When it went to milling, you got different milling procedures, and you got kind of, as far as chemical makeup of zinc and copper can kind of argue with each other, so it's very hard to do a milling process, and it has to be smelted. Now, to this day now, there is not a single smelter left in the United States. There's some, they've been forced out, pretty much so, but there is some smelters about 10 miles into Mexico in Globe, Arizona, down in Globe, Arizona area. They were on our side of the border, and they said you can't have them any here anymore, so they put them about 10 miles across the border. So, you know, that's the way it works, yeah. Well, a mill uses chemical processes and flotation processes to extract the ore. You might have, you might crush and pulverize the rock and feed it into what we call a float cell. A float cell churns, and you might add a certain chemical into that actually the ore will attach itself to. Say like the zinc may attach itself to that, and so it comes up to the top and it scrapes it off like that. Smelting is primarily used for gold, silver, and it's basically like melting it all together. And that again is what the American Smelting and Refining Company was what the Guggenheims had up in the Leadville area. So I knew a lot of old miners through the years who actually used to call it American Stealing and Ripoff Company because they would get their assay from the assayer, you know, boy, this is some pretty good gold and silver, but by the time they got the cut sheet back from the Guggenheim smelter, there wasn't much there, you know. So don't know what. That was just some old guys used to tell me that stuff. So now here's a guy, he's some type of a chute here. As you guys have seen some of the pictures we've seen where I've showed you guys might be working up in these areas here. Down in the tunnel level, you would brace it off like that because you're mining upwards. You would brace that off. Now all the rocks would, from blasting, gravity would bring them down, and then you would have chutes here that would load directly into the car. Does that kind of make sense to you, guys? You know, you want to have gravity work for you as much as possible when it comes to rocks, you know. I don't know too many people who like to shovel rocks uphill, but I haven't been around all that much in my life. Now this looks more like a horse here, doesn't it? Instead of a mule, but you can see where they've got a car loaded and they're building something here that covers off that stope. So when the rocks are blasted up above, it'll kind of hold them in there. You can also leave what's called a rock pillar in a location like this and just come back and mine that ore in later years, which is actually a stronger way to do it. But in the old days, they just went to get all the ore out they could. So that horse, he doesn't look like he's very happy, does he? Poor guy. He needs some sunshine and something. Okay, so just another kind of a tunnel shot for you. It looks like that whole thing kind of leans kind of weird there. But this is actually, this picture is from Idaho Springs. And oh my God, I've dropped it. The Argo Tunnel. So as you guys know, a lot of these mining areas and towns and stuff, they would come in with the water issues and stuff like that. Companies would come in and they would mine like a very long tunnel and connect to different mines to help drain the water. Up in the Leadville area, you guys have maybe heard of the Yak Tunnel, which about 25 years ago became a huge issue with the EPA and some of the stuff there. But it helped drain a lot of the mines out, and they would actually even bring ore out from the mines and process it. They had mills there at the mouth of the tunnel to process that. And it was told to me at one time, the mines that were way back up in the back valleys, they would actually take groceries in from town and hoist them up to the surface for people so they didn't have to do the wagons, you know, in the snow and stuff like that. It was a way to do that. So, but this is the Argo Tunnel, and it was very valuable to the district of Georgetown, not so much Georgetown, I'm sorry, more like Russell Gulch and Central City and Black Hawk. So primarily, you know, when the miners came back through Colorado after the gold rush and stuff, they actually were mining in the central or Idaho Springs area. That's where they kind of started. And you know, that area I would include as sort of Black Hawk and Central City too, you know. And then you would even reach up into Nederland, Caribou, if you guys have ever seen or been over in that area before. So then it was later years that they kind of came down and they actually did like Breckenridge and Fairplay and stuff. But it was right about the same time where miners started moving over into the Leadville area. You know, it was just a little bit further back, so took them a little longer to get over there, basically. And then as the years went by, there was also, you can move on to like the Silverton district down in the San Juan Mountains, was kind of a little bit later years. And of course down there, I think I have a couple of pictures, but down there, you know, everything is so steep that they also did a lot of aerial tram type work and stuff like that. Now, then there's Lake City is down there. Then some of the last was Creed. If you guys know of the Creed area, you guys been down there before? Creed was a huge silver mining area. And then kind of the final was Cripple Creek. It was kind of where the final mining. And there's still a mine operating right now in Cripple Creek, but it's been changed to surface type of a pit mine, where they're mining through where there was old tunnels and old workings and stuff like that. So,
And I think that's owned by South African company.
it was owned by Anglo Gold, but they sold it to Newmont, but Newmont just sold it. Newmont no longer has a single operating. They're not operating a mine in the United States anymore. They said there's too much regulation for them.
There's a museum there, it's a wonderful museum.
Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
great thing, but I made a comment that there was more gold taken out of Cripple Creek than California and Alaskan gold rushes.
That could well be, you know. And don't forget, there might still be mining today down there. One of those trucks might leave, it might be a 25 or 250 ton truck, and they're getting 2.5 ounces of gold out of that. So that's worth it. But you can imagine in the old days, if you're taking only, you know, 1 ton out at a time, you know, you need a higher grade type of ore, which the old timers did, you know.
Production is like 365,000 ounces a year.
Yeah, yeah. It's unfortunate that and I don't know if anybody's going to take it over. Actually, it may be closing down.
There's a rumor that they actually think they might have found what the main lode is.
Yeah.
Excavated yet.
Well, it's operating right now, but I think it's on the verge of Newmont is trying to sell it right now. And Newmont is the largest gold mining corporation on earth. So if they're backing out of it, it's kind of a sad thing, really. It employs a lot of people. You know, it's good jobs, good pay. So I think I may have some Cripple Creek stuff in here.
So was the $1 million highway, or the silver, no, the one that you raised, was that ever assayed, or was that just somebody said?
I think they needed the highway. Yeah, yeah. But there's some mining that went on up above in there, because that's all part of that Idorado vein that came even over from Telluride through there, and Uray and everything. Yeah, huge vein systems over there, and there's still a lot of ore left in those too. So here's an assayer, guys. You probably know what this is. A guy works on with chemical analyses to extract to take down a sample of ore and figure out sort of what the balance is there. You might say, okay, you got like ½ an ounce of gold per ton here on an average. And these assay shops would work day and night, because miners would be mining in a vein. They would want to know exactly what that was carrying. You know, if it was still any good to keep mining. You could tell by looking at it, you could say, oh, this is some good stuff, but to really figure out what it was and to see the profit margin you would have would be to do assaying on it.
What was the process that used?
It's like a smelting, but small process. They would crush the rocks down. They would actually sort of little cupolas would actually just sort of bake it down into a silver gold mixture. Then you would knock off the silver and you would take the weight of that little gold button and you could figure it out. You know, you could extrapolate what your weight was, yeah.
Wow.
I worked in an assay lab for about 6.5 years. Of course, it was much more modern than this, and I really enjoyed it. I really loved the chemistry part of it and the math and stuff like that. It was a good job, you know. I really liked it, but it can get very repetitious too, you know. So.
Were you ever working and had somebody bring a sample in that was really awesome?
Yeah, but we weren't testing for gold or silver, though. Yeah. So now here's some of the milling process. Somebody had asked me a little bit about the milling a little bit earlier. You can see I was talking about some of the flotation cells and stuff like that. The crushed up rock, you know, in a pulverized powder form, you know, certain types of water or certain types of chemicals put in with the water would cause some of the elements to float, some of the elements would sink. Make sense to you? Yeah. These guys are working in a mill, obviously. I just threw that one in there. Now, anybody knows where that is?
Creed?
You got it. Yeah, you could tell by the cliffs there, you know. Yeah. So anyway, you can see when the boom hit Creed, I mean, whoosh, did it ever hit, you know. Pretty snarly down there, huh? You know, that looks like something you'd see like on a New Year's Eve in New York or something, huh? But it was a rough and tumble town, Creed. Am I winding down already? Really? Okay. So how much time do I have, Jana? 5? A couple of minutes? Okay. So guys, this is from the Silverton area. As you can see, some of these mines were so high up on the cliffs and stuff, they set aerial trams, you know. Nowadays, a guy, and probably especially like a lot of you guys who like to live in Frisco, at the end of the job, you might just hop on your skis and head down, right? So here's a picture that I believe this is a Creed area, and it just kind of shows you, you know, that I kind of wanted to show just the amount of work that people would go through to get this kind of stuff, this work done. So, and this picture I put in because I'm fascinated by it, to be honest. I don't know if you guys can see, it's a mule train, and to run some of those cables from those trams and stuff, you might need like thousands of feet of like 1 inch, 1 1/4 inch wire rope. Okay, you know how heavy that stuff is, guys. See how he'd have like a wrap on this mule, and then it would go up and a wrap on that mule, so it would be one continuous piece. But he would drive these trains up there like that. And he hoped one of them, because he'd take everybody. Yeah.
About the splicing of that, how long the splice is, I gather that it's 100 and something feet to do a ski lift. But I wonder how long the splice is.
Well, they would try to not splice this. Yeah. I don't think they had a lot of the ingenuity that they had, and cable's a bit different now too.
Oh, so this is
You know?
a coil with connections in between.
Yeah, this is a coil on this guy, and it's connected over to this mule. So, yeah, that's how they would do that. But a lot of work nonetheless there. I know that ski lift cables are pretty technical work, you know, and they do quite a bit to them, sure. But what that actually was there was a huge mine up in Leadville area, and they discovered they had zinc, but there was not much use for zinc. And in the early 1900s, they discovered that the zinc was good for galvanized metal and stuff like that. So these ore bodies that were there, it was a whole nother huge boom for up there. And this was actually a huge party they had underground. It was a banquet. I'm sorry. And so this is back in some of my property up there. If you guys had been on that tour, you might remember some of this. So Okay, well, she's telling me, I thought I had an hour and a half. I guess I don't. Well, it went okay. It went okay for me. I hope it went okay for you guys.